Welcome to System Science and Economic Growth. Hockey stick graphs show unusual growth. The key idea for this video is number 10. Perpetual economic growth is unsustainable. In this video you will learn what a hockey stick graph looks like, the phases of a hockey stick graph, what a hockey stick graph means, how a hockey stick graph is relative to elapsed time and scale, and why world economic growth forms a hockey stick graph. What is a hockey stick graph? A hockey stick graph is a graph of something that grows in two different phases. The two phases together look a bit like a hockey stick. The first phase is a long period of time when the variable does not grow. This looks a bit like the shaft of a hockey stick. The second phase is a relatively short period of time when the variable grows increasingly fast. This looks a bit like the blade of a hockey stick. What does a hockey stick graph look like? The vertical axis measures the growth of some variable, that is, something that grows. The horizontal axis measures the elapsed time over which the growth takes place. Here's a hockey stick graph. The growth of the variable remains flat for a long time. Then the graph accelerates rapidly over a short period of time. The graph looks similar to a hockey stick. Hockey stick is relative to elapsed time and scale. The elapsed time for this graph is from year 1 through 2020. What if we zoomed in on a time frame from 1700 to 2020? The shaft versus the blade. The elapsed time for this graph is from 1700 through 2020. Because we zoomed in so much, we've chopped off most of the hockey stick shaft. What if we zoomed in on a time frame from 1950 to 2020? The elapsed time for this graph is from 1950 through 2020. Where did the hockey stick go? The stick is out of the time frame because we are too close to the rapid growth period. The rapid growth doesn't appear to be that rapid on the short scale from 1950 to 2020. What does a hockey stick graph mean? It means that in comparison to the long no-growth shaft period, there is something unusual happening in the relatively short blade time period. For an economic growth variable like gross world product, more elapsed time provides a better picture. The longer time frame allows us to determine what had been normal GWP growth over prior centuries. If we can determine what was normal in the past, it allows us to determine what is unusual in the present. Growth of the gross world product. The data on this slide and the next 3 slides are from Our World in Data. We will look at the gross world product from years 1 through 2015. Economist Angus Maddison estimated world economic growth prior to the 20th century back to year 1. The vertical scale in green is the gross world product in trillions of dollars. The scale goes from 0 to 120. The horizontal scale is elapsed time in years. The time span is from year 1 through 2015. The green dots are data points for GWP for specific years. Each data point is identified by the green GWP value and the year in black. The data points go from $0.183 trillion in year 1 to $108.2 trillion in 2015. Notice the slow growth through about 1700, and then a slight acceleration through 1820. Then exponential growth really takes off about 1950. Let's look at GWP data from 1950 through 2015. On this shorter time scale, rapid GWP growth from 1950 through 2015 is less steep than the previous graph. The growth is apparent, but it is a gently rising curve. There is nothing unusual there. Now let's look at GWP data from 1700 through 2015, a much longer time frame than in slide 12. The data from 1950 through 2015 is squeezed way to the right and shows a sharper rise, but not as sharp as in slide 11. The data points from 1700 through 1900 look relatively flat and make the data from 1950 on look somewhat unusual. Now let's look at GWP data from year 1 through 2015, just like in slide 11. The data from year 1 through 1700 are basically flat. From 1700 to 1950, there is a noticeable rise. From 1950 on, there is rapidly accelerating exponential growth. This is a hockey stick graph. Something unusual is happening. Characteristics of GWP growth. GWP growth remained stable from year 1 until about 1700. GWP began growing noticeably from about 1700 until about 1950. GWP growth rapidly accelerated in about 1950. The trend of GWP growth from year 1 through 2015 is a hockey stick graph. Takeaways, hockey stick graph. A hockey stick graph has two phases. The first phase is a long period of little growth. The second phase is a relatively short period of rapidly accelerating growth. The long flat period of little growth looks a bit like the long shaft of a hockey stick. The relatively short period of accelerating growth looks a bit like the blade of a hockey stick. A hockey stick graph means that the blade period of accelerating growth is unusual compared to the long shaft of slow growth. Our current world economic growth is the blade part of a hockey stick graph and is unusual compared to economic growth during most of the past 2 centuries. Resources. First, an online article. This Isn't Normal, 2,000 Years of Economic Growth by Darren Qualman, 10 January 2017. And last, an online chart. World GDP over the last 2 millennia, total output of the world economy, adjusted for inflation and expressed in international dollars in 2011 prices. Our world in data. What's next in economic growth? Understanding gross domestic product. Thanks for watching.